Welcome into a new edition of the Going Deep Buffalo podcast. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Massare, here with Kevin Siracuse on the Built in Buffalo Podcast Network. As always, we're brought to you by the Summit Centers, from the best autism care in Western New York. So please get out there and check them out.
And we are also brought to you by Dave Dengler and the Larson-Timko Funeral Home in Fredonia, New York. Larson-Timko Funeral Home is committed to providing their community with the best possible service in their time of need, offering 100% fully guaranteed price and pre-arranged funeral plans with live streaming available. Visit their website at larson-timko-funeralhome.com or give them a call at 716-679-9000.
And there you have it. Free agency week 2. It is underway, very much right in the middle of week 2. The Bills have since made some moves since the last time we spoke. Every time we seem to go live Wednesdays at 7, we seem to get at least something new to discuss. So that makes our shows fun, and we're glad to have everybody here to discuss some of the things we have on the top of our mind. One of the big news that just broke just a few hours ago, there's been a couple of moves since the last time we all spoke. Actually, Curtis Samuel was signed the next day, but, we have a Mike Edwards signing, a safety that has been in the fold for a little while now. The Bills have been very interested in the safety market for much of the last couple of weeks, as we very well know. And they've had a few visits. Were they ever interested in Justin Simmons? We'll never know, but it seems like they've landed in and honed in on a guy that they've played against at least twice last year, and it's Tampa Bay prior to that. And Mike Edwards, a really good-looking free safety. So we have some advanced analytics and more to go over with Mike Edwards and why we think he's a good signing. The first thing's always first. If the other team is sad to lose him, it's a good signing. And they were pretty sad. Chiefs fans I saw were pretty sad to lose Mike Edwards. And Julian Blackman's another guy they had in on a visit. Will the Bills still continue to be interested in him? The strong safety to Mike Edwards, free safety vibes, maybe still on the table. But Kevin, how are you feeling just first and foremost about the Mike Edwards signing? Is Julian Blackman still around as we await for some of the contract details of Edwards as well?
I really like this Mike Edwards signing. Now, if you remember on the show last week, I highlighted Mike Edwards as a sneaky candidate here for the safety position because everyone was talking about Justin Simmons and Julian Blackman. And to your point, Blackman was in on the visit and the Bills have been linked to him. But I said Mike Edwards could be a sneaky target here because I just think that Mike Edwards is steady and consistent. A third-round draft pick at Tampa Bay in 2019, and he's always been that safety 2, safety 3 kind of player, but he makes plays. He has 4 touchdowns in his career, and as I mentioned, he's that fringe starter, but he makes the most of his opportunities with the first 4 years coming in Tampa and then going to Kansas City. And I believe it was Greg last week who talked about him, and we pulled his comment up, and he said, maybe we should start taking some Kansas City players and we can start to learn how to beat them. And I really like that aspect of it because Mike Edwards knows Steve Spagnuolo in and out now. I know he was only there for 1 year, but he's 27 going on 28. He's very smart. He's savvy. And you can pick his brain about how to take down Patrick Mahomes. And the other thing that I'll say real quick is that this does not prohibit the Bills from drafting a safety, but at the same time, it reduces the need. So if you are on the wide receiver train, the chances that the Bills are going to be taking a wide receiver in the first round just increased.
Couple of increases there. I would say offense in general probably increased between receiver and where will offensive line land? Is that now increasingly going up on the fold, interior offensive line specifically? And then knowing Spencer Brown, will they draft somebody that would sit behind their 2 starting tackles? I certainly hope not. But last year, we thought they were pretty set at the interior O-line position and went and drafted a starter at right guard. So they could very much still draft a starting center, move McGovern to where he was a solid left guard last year, and then have still a solid Edwards as the sixth offensive lineman and basically blocking tight end and more or less a guy that still gets 10 snaps a game. So there's possibilities here of what the Bills will do in the first round. Does Mike Edwards open the door up? Could they further double down on it and get a strong safety to pair with Mike Edwards? Mike Edwards plays both, by the way. I would say he's truly, from what I've read and seen on film, he's truly more of a free safety is where he excels. But 146 snaps in the box, 102 at slot. So what does that tell you? He's covering tight ends. The Bills are going to have him matched up with certain tight ends in the league. Maybe he knows Travis Kelce's tendencies and a couple other tight ends as well as anybody. So we'll see if we see him in that kind of box role, and 346 snaps at free safety. So he's going to pretty much do a lot of different things, but still skewed free safety. Kind of fits in the Micah Hyde sense. Only a 1-year deal. We still don't know the terms of that deal. I'm assuming it's pretty decent looking. And one thing that I really like that I saw when he was the nearest defender in coverage, and this is a stat that I want to go over because I was highlighting Julian Blackman and his run stopping stats, and he is pretty elite at it, and he's pretty elite in the box. Well, I think they're a good pair. But everyone asked me, what about his coverage? And one thing that I saw from Mike Edwards specifically when he's the nearest defender, 45.8 completion percentage, which is third in the NFL, 25% tight window rate, which is third in the NFL, 58% success rate, which is 14th, a negative 0.15 EPA. That means negative 0.15 expected points against, 17th in the league. So he's pretty effective at basically the sport is allowing points when you're a defender, and he was doing so when he was targeted. 6.9 yards per catch as a safety is pretty good, and 28% hawk rate, which is how good he's able to get to the ball and make a play on it, 20th in the NFL. So top 20 in pretty much every single advanced passing category stat that you would want to imagine. They do use these. There's really not a great way to break down safety play based on tackles or what have you. So that's why some of these stats are a little bit more than just your box score snaps in the NFL. So does any of those jump out to you, Kevin? I mean, he's pretty good pass defender.
Yeah, like I said, Mike Edwards is just that sneaky defender who is always in the right place at the right time, aside from that James Cook wheel route that he ran against him in Kansas City. And one thing that I do want to say real quick before I show you the stats that I had, remember this? Mike Edwards was one in coverage on Latavius Murray when Josh Allen pulled off that miraculous play in Kansas City. And he also had that one in the first quarter, or maybe it was end of the first quarter, beginning of the second, where he triple pumped on Dalton Kincaid, and then he sidearmed it to him, and he completed the pass, and Mike Edwards was in on the coverage, and he was just like, are you kidding me? How does this guy do it? Well, Mike, that guy is your quarterback now, so we are glad to have you.
Yeah, some of the bigger plays that he allowed against the Bills were two plays that shouldn't have happened, honestly. So there you have it. I mean, he's been a pretty good defender just all around. I mean, just being 7th out of 66 in reception percentage with over 50% of snaps, obviously, is super good. That's something that I really point on. And EPA, something you hear us talk about on this show pretty extensively over at least as long as, we're over 100 episodes now, everybody. So over the last 100 episodes, so we appreciate everybody tuning into all of those. Smash that like button for us here. So it's been a while. And one of my favorite stats is obviously EPA. 4th out of 91 safeties. Total EPA negative 5.7. So he allowed a touchdown less than his average defender. So, I mean, it's what it is at this stage in free agency. We're assuming it's a good value. Like, no one's going to sit here and say it's 1 year, $24 million. Or, I mean, I would be shocked if it's more than 4, wouldn't you? Like, what's your guess on what do you think he got paid? What would you pay him?
I'm still thinking within the 4 to 6 range. So I would be shocked if it's more than 7. How about that? So, I mean, if it's like a 1 year, $5 million deal, okay. But you're right. I think it's probably in that $4 to $5 million range. Maybe it stretches a little bit, but the new contract details came out for Curtis Samuel's deal that he signed, and we'll be getting to that later on in the show. And correct me if I'm wrong, but his cap hit for 2024 is only $3.4 million, correct?
Yep, had to add a void year in there to get into that, so we can kind of get into some of the salary cap and where the Bills are at the moment. And we'll get into some free agent targets that we have remaining toward the end of the show. And, it's almost draft time. So we're going to have to start talking about some draft as soon as next week. So we'll do that and more toward the end of the show and kind of what we're thinking. But I thought another impressive statistic, just a straight up box score stat, second in the league with defensive touchdowns since 2021 with 4. So that's proof that he makes plays on the ball. And it's just what you're looking for from a free safety. It reminds me a lot of the Micah Hyde signing. Micah, we gave a few more years to. So if Mike Edwards has a good year, we're in a little bit of trouble trying to retain him because he'll go to free agency. And I think was part of the appeal to choose the best team that he could possible. And the reason that Chiefs let him go, why would the Chiefs let him go? The Chiefs have a couple of nice looking safeties on their roster to where they just couldn't roster him. They have Justin Reed, Brian Cook, and up and coming Shamari Connor, who we saw actually in the playoff game when actually Edwards went out early on in that game. And once he went out, I thought the Bills had a pretty successful game plan for the majority of that offensively till the very end. Obviously, we know how that game wound up, but it is very safety friendly is one of the things that he mentioned So like, there's probably no reservations that he's going to be good in this defense, right, Cap? With his comments right off the bat that he mentions how good this safety, how good this safe system is for safety play.
Yeah, I mean, I have the utmost confidence between Edwards and Sean McDermott for being able to coach him up. And you mentioned Micah Hyde, and let me pull this up because I tweeted this earlier, and I was just doing some advanced stats. And this is really interesting because as much as we love Micah Hyde, and like I said in the tweet, as much as I hate losing him, I don't think there's going to be that big of a drop off here. Let me get rid of the ticker for a sec so we can just see the full tweet. But look at these stats. So Micah Hyde played 14 games, started all 14 last year, and he allowed 26 completions on 37 targets, good enough for a 70.3 completion percentage and a 100.7 passer rating allowed when targeted. And then you look at Mike Edwards. Now, granted, he only had 5 starts, but it was Greg Thompson who, kind of further provided some context to this tweet. And he said between defense and special teams, Mike Edwards had about 740 snaps this year, and Micah Hyde had about 490. So they were pretty on par. And you can see with the completions and the targets here, as Edwards was targeted 31 times, so just 6 less than Micah Hyde. And look at those numbers, 48.4 completion percentage and only a 77.2 passer rating allowed when targeted. So again, like as much as it stings to lose Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer for that matter, the Bills are getting younger, and honestly, I think better because you could tell that Hyde and Poyer were both losing a step.
I think what's also kind of interesting. Well, you projected like 7. I would be a little shocked. So PFF had him as a top 150 free agent, which is always good. It was a pretty deep free agency class, 14th ranked safety available. And there's some good big name safeties this year too. And as well, they projected 1 year, $3.5 million. So that's about where I'm at on this deal. 1 year, $3.5 million. Will the Bills go with a void year in there because there's potential that they re-sign him? You can utilize those void years as we've seen them do, actually. The Bills have utilized some void years recently with some extensions. Dawkins' extension, he could utilize some of the void years he had. So there's a lot of things that you can do with a void year. And will we see that? Will remains to be seen. But I do think the Bills will probably try pretty hard, Kevin. You know why? You got to keep them under 4 because otherwise you start losing comp picks. So I doubt the Bills threw away. We talked about it last week. I doubt the Bills threw away potentially a 5th-round pick by giving them just a little bit too much. I'm going to imagine they kept that in mind. And in order to do so, you have to be roughly around, no one knows the exact science, but roughly around 4.25, 4.5, which is probably where he matched. So I'm thinking between 3 and 4.5 is where he's going to end up on a pretty much a prove it deal in a safety friendly system. I think that's kind of where he'll lie, in my opinion. So that's first and foremost where I think his number is going to be. Well, we'll see. I'm thinking 1 year, $4.25 million. So we'll see how close I am with that projection. What will his cap hit be though? Could even be lower if the Bills did tack on a void year. So total career snaps, I kind of gave you last year, but he's only played at the line of scrimmage 2% of the time, 74 snaps. That's pretty much like right about to rush, usually in pass rush situations. He's played in the box 720 times, so that's 22%. 55% at free safety, 1,700 snaps. So it would pretty much tell you he's played over double the snaps at free safety. He's a free safety in my opinion, but he's got that sneaky 565 snaps from the slot. So he can definitely do some things from the slot position. But from safety being in the top 2 needs, I do think that there is some play now to where it's not necessarily an urgent need to make it a top 2 pick. I think that with an addition of Julian Blackman, or if they do more at the safety position, I think you can almost take it off the board, or at least until the late rounds. So where do you stand on that, Kevin, as we kind of like think about safety? Do you want to add one and kind of put it to bed? Or do you want to add one in the draft? Like, what's your philosophy to kind of get rid of a position group from a needs list?
No, I think I'm good in free agency now. I've seen people in the comments are asking about Blackman, maybe Justin Simmons. And I think that the Bills are pretty much done. And we'll get to this more later on in the show. But I think from here on out, we're going to see a defensive tackle signing and an RB2 signing. And I know some people are saying that you can draft that big bruiser in the draft. I think at least we're going to see that defensive tackle signing. It was reported today that Austin Johnson is in town visiting with the Bills. I think that would be a great signing. And he was one of my targets yesterday, actually. I was going to say a couple days ago, but I tweeted the list yesterday about some remaining free agent targets. So I would love to see the Bills bring in Austin Johnson. Daquan Jones would too, for that matter, if you've been keeping up with his Twitter. So yeah, no, I think that I'm pretty good at safety now, because tying this in with what you were talking about with the contract that they probably gave to Mike Edwards, let's just say it was a 1 year, $4 million deal, right? Because that seems in the right ballpark. So I think if you give Mike Edwards a relatively cheap contract, you're already paying Taylor Rapp like a safety 2 or a safety 3. He got a 3-year, $10.3 million deal. I think this sets him up perfectly to be able to draft that rookie. Because let's not forget they re-signed Cam Lewis and they have DeMar Hamlin. And I know people will say that DeMar is a cut candidate, but we'll take it for what it is right now. The Bills have 4 safeties under contract, and they're probably going to have more when it's all said and done. So I think from here on out, this gives the Bills a flexibility to be able to draft that safety, but they don't have to rush for it. They don't have to reach and say, we need a free safety. Let's go get one in the first round. Like I said at the beginning of this show, this allows them to still draft that wide receiver, but then they can kind of have a little bit of fun with finding that safety, maybe some trade ups or some trade downs. But now safety is not as pressing of a need following the Mike Edwards news today.
Yeah, and I sure would like to see some more from the safety room. So I'm a little bit different than you. I don't need a free agent safety from here. Obviously, there's only really 2 that I would say would help this roster out, and that's Justin Simmons. Will he be redundant now with Mike Edwards? I mean, I think the real pairing, especially to me, would be with, otherwise someone's got to play in the box, and Rapp would still be playing, and Mike Edwards would go to a 3 if you do go with the Simmons, which is possible. I just don't see the Bills going to the price point, hence probably why they looked at the other 2. But from a safety standpoint, I'd really like to see the Blackman pairing. I think it would be really fun. I think they would have 4 good safeties on the roster. Probably makes Hamlin on the outside looking in from the roster spots wise, especially if they go that route. But then it also takes a huge need away from the draft room and frees up draft picks. So I think if they can get Blackman for around $4 million as well or less, I think the Bills are in a really good position to kind of pair their new safety pairing up. And with a free safety, so they say that Mike Edwards is best when he has a pure, strong safety with him. And I think from the option to have somebody like Blackman and Rapp on the other side could maximize all their value. And guess what? If we have an injury again, they're in a little bit better of a situation than we were this season, especially with Rapp going out. The Bills didn't have that third safety look, and that kind of hurt them down the stretch. And then they didn't have linebackers, as we know how that story goes. They went out and got Nicholas Morrow, to make sure that they have some solid depth there behind their starters. So totally entrenched new middle of the field that the Bills are rolling out with. And I'd like to see them go with Blackman too, because I think he's a baller. So I have to imagine with that being wrapped into a bow that the Bills are still in on Blackman based on what the price point would be. From all accounts that I've heard within people I trust, that they were still interested in him. I don't know if that has changed in the last few hours. It's very possible that could have changed based on the number here from Edwards. The more money that Mike Edwards got, the least likely any other move is made. If he got something reasonable, that would signal to me the Bills were interested in seeing his medicals and maybe making something happen. So we'll see how that all plays out to kind of put a bow on that safety room that the Bills will probably, I still think, add to it. So it's either going to be with a signing like Blackman, or it's going to be in the draft. So I think that there is still one more spot to be had because ultimately it's still just Cam Lewis and Taylor Rapp there. So I think they would like to have a 4th, and then right there on the 5th would be Hamlin. So that's kind of how I see the safety room going. And they're putting, it's coming to a little bit more into picture now with how this is all developing. But I feel pretty strong about that. That's going to be a good unit. Anything else that you saw from Edwards that you like, Kevin? Any other notes, any other nuggets, or anything that you saw around that encouraged you about the signing?
Well, I do have his box score stats here.
Okay.
So 4 years with Tampa Bay. Again, he was a fringe starter, sharing snaps with Jordan Whitehead and Antoine Winfield. And who was the other one that you said? Logan Ryan, I believe, was there too.
Late in at the end of his career, at the end of his Tampa Bay time. Yep.
Yeah, so Tampa Bay cycled through a lot of safeties, and Edwards was just kind of that steady, consistent safety 2, safety 3 for them. So, I mean, the good news is he played in a lot of the games. I'm not sure of his injury history, but I haven't heard too many injuries here. And you can see 2 interceptions in 2020, 3 interceptions in 2021, and then 2 the following year. And the most tackles that he had was 82 in 2022 in just 13 games played. So, I mean, some pretty solid numbers there from Mike Edwards. Now, speaking of injuries, I wanted to ask you about this with Julian Blackman, because we've heard rumblings that the Bills have been interested in Blackman, but one of the things that could be holding them up is his injury history. And this is a guy who tore his ACL. And what was his most recent injury? Was it an Achilles too?
Yes. For who? Sorry, for who? Blackman?
Blackman, yeah. Because
no,
I know
shoulder was his most
okay.
recent. Yeah.
So it was the ACL in 2019 in December. So that might have been during a bowl game. I'm not sure. I'd have to check. But when he was in college, at the end of that season, he tore his ACL, and then that might have knocked his draft stock back a little bit. But then he was able to recover in time for the NFL. But he's been injury riddled a lot. And like you said, with that shoulder injury being the most recent one, I'm wondering if that is something that prohibited the Bills from going after Blackman. And maybe their price range was a little bit off, where he said, hey, I'm 25. I want a second contract that's pretty favorable. And the Bills said, we want to give you a relatively favorable contract, but we can't give you more than, let's just say, $5 million because of your injury history. We suffered a lot of injuries. We're trying to get younger and healthier and more durable. So maybe that's why they went with Mike Edwards. Even though he's 2 years older, he's a little bit more durable.
Yeah, you're definitely onto something. I don't know if he thinks now that all the safety spots are filling up. I think that money's kind of dried up, especially mostly in free agency, but especially at the free agent safety spot. So maybe unless he goes back to Indy or whatever may be the case there, I don't ultimately see him getting money. So I think he's kind of choosing, I'll be honest, he's probably choosing his spot based on $2 or $3 million. That's probably where he's, deciding where he's going to play, because he's a much better safety than that. And he's going to be able to handpick what he wants to do in his free agent destination. So I think that the Bills probably had a number on him and said, hey, if that works for you, let's get a call and let's get this thing going. So I don't know that that's off the table at any point, really, for any player. It could be at basically any position, maybe even still receiver or whatever you want to talk about. If someone calls him back and says, yeah, I'll play for that, the Bills will sign them. So it doesn't really matter. All it will do is alter their draft plan. So if it's at the receiver position, let's say, whoever it may be that's still good out there, is there anyone left that would even alter the receiver plans? I still think the Bills want to get in a 4 to 5 year wide receiver with Josh Allen. We'll kind of chat about that at the end of the show, but the safety room is definitely coming together with the Rapp re-signing. With Cam Lewis is actually getting some significant, decent money to play special teams and be a depth piece. And then we'll wait on the Edwards money. So will the Bills add to that room still? I think they will. But will it come in the draft or will it come in one of these free agency names? Still kind of remains to be seen. But I don't think it necessarily takes them out of the running for any of the remaining free agent safeties. So
I just want to say, I looked this up on Blackman. It was an Achilles injury in 2021. So it was the ACL in 2019, Achilles in 21, and now most recently the shoulder.
Yeah, right. The most recent is the shoulder, though.
Oh, yeah. But
yeah.
When I asked about the Achilles, I thought you said no. And I was like, I thought I heard.
Oh, no. It's not the most recent. The most recent is what they're reviewing. Those are fine. What they're reviewing now is the shoulder. That's the thing that is still in question. So I think people are reviewing the shoulder to see when he'll be ready. And I think he's saying he's going to be ready to go with that shoulder, but teams are going to have to make their own decision on Blackman. And teams, so a team wouldn't bring him in if they didn't think that they were pretty serious about an offer. So it's still pretty interesting to see where Blackman will end up. I'd be pretty interested to sign him. I think he'd be a really good addition still based on the final money of both of these guys. So we'll kind of see how that goes.
So just so we're all on the same page now. So he did tear his ACL at the end of 2019. He came back in 2020, got drafted by the Colts, played in 15 games, started 14 of them. Then in 2021, he started all 6 games that he played in, but then he tore his Achilles. 2022, He came back, played 14 games, started 11 of them. And then this past year in 2023, 15 games, 15 starts, and then he suffered that shoulder injury. So every other year he's been injured. So I guess maybe this year is his healthy year. So maybe a cheap 1-year deal. I could see it, but realistically, after today, I just think that the Bills are going to attack defensive tackle, maybe a running back, and then let's just hit it with the draft.
Yeah, I think running back ran its course. I don't know that there's going to be a move to still be made at the running back room, but we do have to talk about a move that was made in Casey Toohill. a guy that did have a pretty significant increase in production. His pass rushing snaps are really good, a 9+ RAS. His best season, 5 sacks last year, and is basically, in what the Bills' opinion at least, would be an upgrade at the defensive 4 spot, maybe over Shaq Lawson, maybe over whoever else that they may play at that Kingsley Jonathan, whoever else they may have at that 4 spot. So it is a pretty good. He is in that same kind of age range. They're only looking really at 26 to 28-year-olds. Obviously, they re-signed Daquan Jones. But for the most part, the Bills have kind of stayed with that second contract or under 30 method so far here in free agency. And that's kind of one that they've been rolling with, including, a couple players that we'll still continue to mention. But Casey Tuhill, pretty solid depth, right, Kevin?
Yeah, when I tweeted yesterday, I said that this seems like a low risk, high reward type of player, a guy that has a lot of upside, and I see him as a Shaq Lawson and or Kingsley Jonathan replacement, as you alluded to. So I'll be completely honest. I'm not that familiar with Casey Tuhill, but, after doing some research on him, he's had 20+ tackles each of the last 3 seasons, and like you said, 5 sacks, and I think he has a lot of promise. I've heard a lot of people say this seems like a Trent Murphy signing back in the day.
Yeah.
I don't know about that, but I think that this could be a fiery guy with a motor. And to be honest, as much as I like Shaq Lawson, he wasn't really doing it for me anymore. It was like, we'll bring Shaq back every year, where it was like, okay, go test the market. If there's nothing there, we'll have a contract here waiting for you. And every year I was like, yeah, come on, bring back Shaq Lawson. And then it's just like, okay, maybe that's run its course. So let's get a little bit more juice in here, a new face with Casey Tuhill, and see what he has to offer.
Yeah, and I think the big difference between them, the players, 6, 7 RAS, but the biggest difference between the players would be the contract amount. Like Trent Murphy got paid. So if Casey Tuhill got paid, I think I guess you could make that that comparison be a little bit more relevant. I think what makes those players relevant would be like their contract amount. So until we see him get a Trent Murphy style contract, and yes, Trent Murphy was athletic, an 8.4 on the athletic score. 9.7 is a tick better athletically. So, yes, it's similar, but there's really no, he didn't sign it unless he signs a 3-year, $22.5 million deal that Trent Murphy did 4 years ago now. I don't really see many similarities between the playing style of the players. So, and Trent Murphy was, I guess, one of the quote unquote bigger busts of the free agency market, 2018, basically, but he started from 2018 to 2020. So really the contract was signed. Geez. You're looking at 6-7 years ago now, which is a pretty big difference. And he got a lot of money for the cap space at that time. So I will admit that was a pretty big deal, but the Bills were taking a flyer on a guy that they thought, could increase from that 9 sack year the year prior. And I think that they're, with Casey Tuhill, I don't think they're going to be paying much more than 3 a year. So we'll see what that ends up looking like. But a good guy to add to the roster. Pretty excited to have him in the fold. I do think another upgrade at the defensive 4 spot, to your point about other players like Shaq. So they definitely upgraded that on the roster. And then I think for the most part have upgraded a majority of these holes, except I guess in whatever you think of at the current moment, Edwards and Rapp versus Hyde and Poyer. Like, I guess late career Hyde and Poyer. Which way are you going on that, Kevin? Is that how do you feel about that kind of swap?
Right now, it's not an improvement, but I think by week 1 it will be, because I think that we will see a draft pick. Maybe an undrafted free agent comes in, maybe another low-tier free agent comes in. And to your point, a late career Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, I think it'll even it out. And this safety room with Sean McDermott's expertise, I think we'll be pretty confident going into the season. And one other thing that I want to say about Casey Tuhill is, we talked about Yetur Gross-Matos as a potential pairing with AJ Epinesa as defensive end 3 and 4. He got a 2-year, $18 million contract from San Francisco. That was way out of the price range that we were predicting. We thought maybe a 2-year, $8 million deal. So he got more than double what we were projecting. So that's fine. San Francisco can have him for that matter. But essentially, Casey Tuhill is going to be paired with AJ Epinesa as of right now. If the Bills don't do anything else, you're going to have Greg Rousseau and Von Miller as your starters, with AJ Epinesa and Casey Tuhill on your backups here, and then maybe Kingsley Jonathan, because I think Kingsley Jonathan is another guy like Casey Tuhill, just a high energy, high motor guy. So I mean, those guys can probably battle it out for defensive end 4 and 5. But I mean, do you think we're set at defensive end? Do you think we could go get another one in free agency? Do you think the Bills will draft one? How do you feel about this, Kevin?
No, it's a little different than safety, where I think that that's still very much in play to have an upgrade to bring that like to its full potential. I think at the defensive end spot with the guys you just mentioned, and they do have Kingsley Jonathan and Cameron Klein, some decent looking younger players behind Casey Tuhill. I think they're all set. They're going to bring it into the draft, and now I think that's probably a mid-round choice, especially with all those 4th, 5th, and 6th they have. I do think those will be the options that someone will be competing with Klein and Kingsley Jonathan as well. So that's kind of where I'm at with that spot, Kevin. I think they're set. At the defensive end, I do think is the one position they're set. The biggest difference, though, is obviously, Rousseau, Von Miller, and AJ Epinesa back, but you are going from Leonard Floyd to Casey Tuhill. So that is kind of, at the moment, kind of the only difference at the defensive end spot. Obviously, you can say that is a current downgrade. Are you concerned at all about that? Because the rest of the room is the same, but that's the change you made.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, even though that I like the contract better, because we assume that Tuhill, let's just say he got like a 1-year, $2 million deal, and I'll take that over Gross Matos' 2 years, $18 million. But the problem is, if you're going to pair him with Epinesa, that's a downgrade from Leonard Floyd. So I think we need to wait and see what they do. They might have another trick up their sleeve in free agency. And I think with those 11 draft picks, they will be drafting one. So essentially, you're going to have the draft pick, Tuhill, and Kingsley Jonathan battling it out for defensive 4. And maybe there's another free agent option. I mean, maybe Shaq Lawson comes back. I don't think so. But there could be, one of those guys who just doesn't like his market, and the Bills can get him here on a cheap vet min deal. But yeah, I mean, that is a bit of a downgrade if you're looking at it from that perspective with Leonard Floyd. But I will say real quick, it could be an upgrade because Von Miller should be back to maybe not peak Von Miller, but he should be 100% healthy. So maybe those two weigh each other out a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is last year's Von Miller. Obviously we've downgraded the room by going from, Leonard Floyd to Casey Tuhill. That's obviously a downgrade. But if it's anywhere near Von Miller, that's now, incentivized to perform, maybe, fresher, that injury may finally have healed, and a combination of, so an increase at Von Miller plus Casey Tuhill is probably a lot closer than we're discussing now. And I think you're going to add a draft choice in there as well to kind of see what you can do. Will they go with a top 60 defensive end? I really don't think so. But also they get $10.2 million from Trey White. Will defensive end be a spot that they entertain at all? That's remains to be seen, because they certainly did last year. So, it's never out of the realm of possibilities. I still think that the additional safety is in play. That's where I have the Bills going. If they do if they continue to make another move, I think that it's at the safety spot. If besides some $1.7 million guys or less, I think if they spend over $3 million, it will be another final safety, but we'll see if that actually holds itself to be true. But Tuhill does have some nice looking advanced analytics from last year. So he's a guy that I think could still contribute. I want to bring this up real quickly. Just this was the the free agency sheet as of a few hours ago. So obviously a couple of names have come off of this, but there's definitely still some talent to be had on the list. Obviously we've talked about Blackman and Simmons pretty extensively. Could they go with like a Quandre Diggs or Kayvon Wallace? There's still some safeties, even Rudy Ford. Will they bring back Micah Hyde? There's still definitely some names on this list where the Bills could go. There's definitely still plenty of corners. There's definitely some names that you can play and be pretty confident with them playing. So could the Bills add to that room? They sure could. And then there's obviously a couple of decent looking defensive ends. So will they go with a Van Noy or a Clowney or Mike Dana? There's still a few names in there, Tice Bowser or Bud Dupree, Jerry Hughes, old friend Jerry Hughes. So there's still a few names where the Bills could do something there. Anything you like that sticks out to you from this?
I was going to say, let's talk about defensive tackle, because I think that's more likely, because if anything at defensive end, I mean, I like those names that you mentioned, but that probably wouldn't come until after June 1st, right? You get more money from Trey White. You see what
Correct.
the market is doing. You see what happens during the draft. So I think we're not going to see anything else at defensive end until at least June. And that's when they signed Leonard Floyd and Poona Ford last year. So in terms of defensive tackles, who do you like there? Because I'm a big Austin Johnson fan.
I think if you look at the list I don't think Calais Campbell is obviously probably still the best on the list, but I just don't know if he's the fit. Teair Tart is my personal favorite remaining on the list, but if you look through it, I don't think beyond Teair Tart and Austin Johnson, there's too much there. So I think you're almost to the point where you're going to punt this defense. Sure, you could bring in one of those guys, if you want to bring in somebody just to compete. But I think as terms of feeling good about at least quality depth, I think you're kind of looking at the Teair Tart and up, and Calais Campbell doesn't really, I don't believe, fits the mold. So that really leaves Teair Tart and Austin Johnson for the most part. Austin Johnson is said to be in town too, Kevin. So I guess why do you like him? Tell us your opinions on that potential free agent signing.
Well, Austin Johnson, let's see. I was going to try to get rid of this, but that's all right. We'll leave it up for now. Got too much floating around here. Anyways, Austin Johnson started his career with Tennessee. Then he went to the Giants for 2 years, and most recently has been with the Chargers. Now, this is a guy who's only started the majority of his games in 2021 with the Giants, and then this past season with the Chargers. And in 2021, that was arguably his best season because he had 72 tackles and 3.5 sacks. This year, he did not record a sack, but he had 46 tackles. And I think this is a guy who's 29 years old, listed at 6'4", 314. And I believe he has some inside-outside versatility. And I just think that he could be a nice presence on that Bills defensive line. And the Air Raid Hour tweeted that the other day, saying that Austin Johnson was a potential target. And Daquan Jones slid in there, and he was like, wait, Austin Johnson is a free agent. He's like, that dude is one heck of a player. Sign me up. So Daquan Jones is a fan, and I think if you can get him behind Daquan to fill out your defensive tackle depth, I mean, me too. Sign me up.
I think, well, as we talked about, unless Teair Tart's in play, I think he's kind of the last kind of guy at this spot. I mean, Marlon Davidson doesn't really do too much for me. He's never really done anything in the league. I'm not sure how he's so high ranked by Mike Clay. Might have some good run splits. 6'3", 303. 25-year-old player. So he definitely is former second round pick. So there's definitely some interesting pedigree still there. But outside of that, like if you're interested in a Marlon Davidson, maybe, but there's really not a ton that you would feel great about bringing in at this stage. So it's increasingly likely that it's a very high decision for draft strategy. I think that it's a top 60 pick at the moment, especially as some of these other things come off the board. I think that defensive tackle is firmly in play at both of those two picks. Hate it or love it, whether he's a rotational guy or not. I still think the Bills will feel like they need to add to the pipeline next to Ed Oliver, regardless of if the player is going to be considered a starter or not. I just don't want to get into a forced situation to where they kind of feel like Kyer Elam and they start making decisions based on needing to get a tough defensive tackle in the pipeline, and then they never play him, and then they want to develop him. I do think they still need more of an immediate contributor, and there's definitely some immediate contributor names. But I think it's more of a draft position, in my opinion, regardless of what they do with Austin Johnson. I don't think he really he's a nice-looking depth player. Can we with confidence say that Austin Johnson is a pure upgrade over Jordan Phillips or Poona Ford or Tim Settle? Do you feel that way, Kevin? I mean, the league doesn't. Tim Settle got kind of paid. So do you feel like Austin Johnson would be an upgrade over the three the Bills were rotating last year? And then I guess Linval Joseph too.
I would say he would be an upgrade, but I wouldn't say it confidently just because I don't know enough about Austin Johnson. Like I haven't seen enough. And especially in this system, I mean, it's all fine and dandy on paper, but actually getting him here, that's going to be the main question. But if the Bills do get Austin Johnson or any other defensive tackle for that matter, I think that they will still draft one, as you just mentioned here. Because if you have Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones as your starters, you need two more players, if not three. And I talked about that fifth defensive tackle potentially being Jordan Phillips because he's teetered between retiring or not. So Beane might say, hey, if you want to come back, we'll have the roster spot open for you. So I think there's room for one free agent and one draft pick because I think they're definitely going to draft one. They have to. With Daquan getting up there in age, I know it's a 2-year deal, but you want to start building that depth. And again, they don't have anyone else. I mean, there's Eli Anku and guys like that. But I think this is ripe for a defensive tackle to come relatively early. And by early, I mean before day 3.
Yeah, I think, 6'4", 314. I mean, he's definitely a guy. He soaked up a lot of tackles last year. He's definitely got a lot of playing time. But really is kind of the last remaining name. So we'll see if the Bills want to add that depth. Don't forget, there's really 3 guys there that they lost. So they haven't filled them. They do still have 2 starters on the roster and have Eli Anku, who did not play over those 3 players. So there's definitely 3 names they're trying to fill just by pure data and numbers. There's a lot of names to still be had there. So even with Austin Johnson, I think the Bills are very much in the defensive tackle market as high as they probably can. So based on what they do at safety, and I still think that safeties are in play at the moment, especially a strong safety could still very much be in play based on how they feel about Rap, though. Like if they're like, kind of a shut door case on Rap, maybe safety's not in play. But looking at a box safety in Blackman kind of tells me they were knowing that they had Rap. Still kind of tells me that they're in play because they would have only been looking at free safeties. And they kind of feel pretty good about what they've done so far. So if they can take safety out of the mix, defensive tackle is like, I don't want to call it a shoo-in top 60, but I'm feeling pretty confident the Bills are going top. The only thing that could change that kind of strategy is what do they think about the interior O-line position? So that's kind of what would change that strategy. And then I don't think they're going to do anything crazy at the running back spot. But I mean, you're projecting that they do go with a running back signing as well. Ty Johnson was signed. So speaking of the running back room, so he was a re-signing too, since we've all last spoke. If everyone wouldn't mind smashing that like button, that helps us bring in, just hit that for us. That means so much for all the people watching right now. It means a ton. But bringing in Ty Johnson, are you feeling, I'm assuming a fairly minimum-ish deal? Running back 2, running back 3, you've had this discussion before. I look at him as a running back 3. What else do the Bills need to do at that position, Kevin?
Well, tying this in with the defensive tackle, let me pull up this chart that I tweeted yesterday. So remaining free agent options here. Defensive tackle, as we mentioned, Austin Johnson, Jonathan Hankins, Tier Tart, and Lawrence Guy. Now, Hankins was signed by Seattle.
Yep.
So our top target here is Austin Johnson. You said Tart. I just want to ask you about Guy real quick before we turn our attention to running back. Would you be in on Lawrence Guy? Because this is a guy, 33 years old. He was still productive in New England. I think he could be a nice defensive tackle 3 or 4. But I want to hear your thoughts.
He's just a guy. But no, I mean, he's 34. I just think they're going away from that style of aged player at this moment until they convince me otherwise. And they already have Daquan Jones there that kind of fills the bill of the vet/older player. I just don't necessarily think he would be in the, or call it Calais Campbell. I just don't think that he would be in the running for the style of player that they will sign, and kind of played in a different kind of defense with Bill Belichick too. So I don't really see a fit there. The player did have a good season. So like if they can find a seamless transition, it wouldn't be crazy. Especially he's one that, especially like August, if he's still out there and they're looking like they didn't do as much as they wanted, that could make sense. But I still think the names here are Johnson and Tart. I don't really think, if you can't get either of them for some reason, I think you're just gonna have to take it to the draft. So that's kind of where I stand with it. And then if you don't get anything in the draft, then maybe you call up a guy like Calais Campbell or Lawrence Guy, and you kind of work on it from there with your decisions at that point. But to the running back room, which you also have listed here underneath the defensive tackles, Foreman has signed. Really, all that's left is all that's left
another
is Zeke.
March has come and gone where I do not get Deontay Foreman. He signed with the Cleveland Browns today.
Must have been really low because that room's loaded. They have Naeem Hines too, who also signed there, and obviously Ford and Chubb. So I'm not exactly sure what they're doing there at that position group, and they're signing all the quarterbacks too. So I'm not exactly sure what the plan is in Cleveland. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Ezekiel Elliott, J.K. Dobbins, Rashad Penny. I'm assuming you would like one of them, right?
Yeah, now, to Spin's comment here, I think he was just kidding, but he said I didn't update the graphic. This was yesterday, and I'm not paying for Twitter, so I don't have the edit option. So I tweeted this yesterday afternoon, and obviously, Mike Edwards is a Buffalo Bill now. Austin Johnson is here on a visit. Foreman signed with Cleveland. So looking at this list minus those players, who do we like? I think my top running back option would be Ezekiel Elliott. I think if you can get him here on a one year, $2 or $3 million deal, I think he would pair up nice with James Cook. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is interesting just because of the Kansas City factor and the Joe Brady factor as he had him in LSU. Do you think that could be an option? Because he's only 24 years old. I know he's had some injuries, which has caused him to lose a step. So, I mean, like between him or Zeke, who would you like there? Then I'll just finish real quick with J.K. Dobbins and Rashad Penny. I think those guys are good too, but I mean, they've been injury riddled their whole careers as well. So, I mean, do you like any of those running backs there that I listed?
Yeah, I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is probably I just don't think they have room for someone like Zeke anymore. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire and what he was able to do with Joe Brady is going to be look at what they valued in Curtis Samuel, and I guess we'll talk about him in a moment here. But I think that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a natural fit, the way he plays, the way he can catch out of the backfield. He's a pure receiver at times. Saw him made a ridiculous play at the end of the season when the Chiefs were struggling. They were struggling pretty bad at the end of the regular season, and Edwards-Helaire almost kind of brought him out of that. I believe it was in the Bengals game when they actually needed a win. They were starting to fall out of the race a little bit, and he did come in strong and has flashed. I mean, he's been good. He has run into some injury issues himself. Then obviously you can see from this list, the only one you didn't mention so far is Kareem Hunt, and he's had some pretty good success in the goal line situations and short yardage to go, goal to go situations. So to me, could Kareem Hunt be in play? He would be the only one that you didn't. He had 9 touchdowns last year, so he would be the only one you didn't bring up, and it's still just 28. I feel like that guy is definitely in his mid 30s, but he's still just 28 years old. So that would be some interesting points there at the running back room. So I'd like Edwards-Helaire. I could see if they wanted a volume carrier like Edwards, but his numbers are just horrific right now. I don't think that he gets better as he gets carries, and I just don't think he would get that many. So I think that's why truly like a Kareem Hunt, Clyde Edwards-Helaire would probably make the most sense. And then taking a flyer on J.K. Dobbins to me could be the play as well. Could be the play to take a real talented guy at $1.5 million and just see. Because you don't need him. You have Ty Johnson. You may draft somebody, but J.K. Dobbins at a 1.5 rate could be very interesting to me. So will they go that route? It could be in play, especially as that running back 2 spot lingers open. So what are your thoughts?
I mean, I'm reading through the comments here, and I think people are saying that they would want Zeke here on one of those cheap contracts. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but Damian Harris signed a $1.7 million deal last year, right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that's going to be the contract that the Bills sign, that big bruiser in free agency. Who's going to take a $1.7 million deal? Does Zeke think that he's better than that and he's going to hold out until he gets more money? I think he knows that he's past his prime. He's going to be 29 when the season starts. So if you could get him here for 1.7, I would totally take Ezekiel Elliott because I think he could be the Thunder to James Cook's Lightning. I do like the thought of J.K. Dobbins, but he's just hurt so often that really turns me off. Same thing with Rashad Penny. I think maybe he deserves one more shot because he is really, really good when he's healthy, but he can never stay healthy. Now, I will say Philadelphia scratched him a lot last year, so maybe he has a little bit extra juice left in the tank. And honestly, the more I think about it, the more I'm warming up to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, just because of that Kansas City factor and getting him to reunite with Joe Brady. And we know how Brady likes to use his running backs. So if you could get Clyde Edwards-Helaire here with Joe Brady, mix him in with James Cook and Ty Johnson, that could be better than I originally thought.
Agreed. I think that at this stage, in the way that the free agency has played out, at a 1.77 deal with Joe Brady, I like the Edwards-Helaire. Do I like the Edwards-Helaire deal if you went out and did 2 for $4 and we're thinking he would be a real running back 1 competition? Probably not. But I do like him at this stage of the offseason to be able to contribute, especially at his price point. But yeah, I mean, you still do have guys like, will they go with the Dobbins? I mean, Ezekiel Elliott himself is only 28 years old. He's got some savvy moves in him too. He's a good pass catcher, pass block. He can do a lot of different things. I just think he's gotten progressively worse each year from the 2021 Cowboy season to the 2022 Cowboy season, running at 3.5 yards per clip. I just don't overly feel great about that. But they went with Latavius Murray, who was a specialist in a way for much of last year. So I think that there's an option, but I think the Bills will look draft first. I do. I think that may be taking it to the draft, especially with all those picks, and to add a mid-round guy that you're going to control now for 4 years at $1 million a year might be pretty encouraging long-term too, as your running back too. So I think that that's probably their plan, and we'll get into some running backs on future shows, but I just don't see them divvying out much more than the 1.5 to 1.7 range, if at all. And maybe that'll come after the draft, Kevin. So that's kind of where I stand at running back at this point.
And I say this every week, and I'm going to say it again. And Dave mentioned it here with this comment. This running back 2, has to be able to pass protect. That's the big question. Whether you sign that one in free agency or you draft one, who's going to give you your best option to protect Josh Allen? And I talked about protecting him in those short yardage situations when they have to run the ball and maybe take the ball out of Josh's hands to limit the amount of hits that he's taking. And then when he drops back to pass, who can sustain those blocks the most? Who can hold up and protect Josh? Is that going to be Zeke? Can Clyde Edwards-Helaire block? Can Rashad Penny block? Or J.K. Dobbins, for that matter? Are we going to trust a rookie to come in here and say, hey, when we're on passing downs, your main responsibility is protecting Josh Allen? I need to be sure that the rookie can do that, because that is a big factor going into this season with Josh Allen getting another year older.
Yeah, and I think that what will the Bills continue to do? You said to protect Josh. Will they do anything else at the offensive line position? Is interior offensive line growing on the needs list of what they may do to continue to strengthen that? Or there's still definitely some free agents out there if they wanted to add to the room. They are bringing back, a majority of their players, at the offensive line spot, most notably 7 of them that are returning. So they are bringing back 7 of their main 9. Obviously, they traded Bates and let Morse go, but 7 out of 9 still a pretty good rate. But do they replace those couple that they're missing? How do they do it? I don't believe. Is it Richard Garage, a guy I've liked in the past? He's a tackle. He may replace more of an Effetti kind of player. But what are they going to do at interior? I do think that there is a position to be had at the interior spot still. So how will they tackle that? More with a vet or on the rookie? We'll have to wait and see. But kind of the news, kind of going in reverse order, is the Curtis Samuel signing that happened right after our show last week. Turning into a 3-year deal, but looking more in like with the void year being a 4th-year void year, bringing his total cap option down to $3.4 million this year, about $9 million for the next 2. And then the void year eating up a little bit of it. I know you've had a chance to talk about it, so I guess tell me about how you feel about Samuel now looking at it, 5 or 6 days later.
Well, when the news broke, I was very happy. But then when I saw the contract details, I was like, man, that's a lot of money for a potential wide receiver 4 or gadget player. So I guess the best way I'll say this is, if the Bills can still draft that wide receiver 2, hopefully in the first round, I love this deal. But if this prohibits them from drafting a wide receiver and instead they go draft defense, I'm not going to like this contract. So overall, I love Curtis Samuel, the player, because I have him slotting in right now as wide receiver 4, because in my mind, we're drafting a wide receiver with this loaded talent here in the first round. Or maybe, we'll cover this next week and in future shows, but maybe some trade ups or some trade downs. But either way, I think the Bills have to make it a point this year to go draft that wide receiver too. So if I have Curtis Samuel slotting in as wide receiver 4, this is someone that Brandon Beane describes as someone who is a first backup off the bench, who can have that inside-outside versatility. He can line up in the slot. He can line up in the boundary. And I think Curtis Samuel will line up in the backfield, because something that Stephon Diggs did a lot last year was line up in the backfield. And I think he was essentially playing out of position. Joe Brady put Diggs in the backfield, and they were trying those screens to him, and it just wasn't working. I think that'll be Curtis Samuel this year. So again, you can put him in the slot. You can put him in the boundary. You can put him in the backfield. You can run the jet sweeps. He can be a deep option. So I really like Curtis Samuel, the player, as he reunites with Joe Brady, where he had his best season in Carolina, as I have their stats here, or at least Curtis Samuel's stats. As you see, 2020 in Carolina, that was his best year, where he had over 1,000 total yards, 851 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns with Joe Brady as his coordinator. And it's also important to note the previous 5 quarterbacks that threw him the ball going from 2023 backwards. So Sam Howell, Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke, Teddy Bridgewater, and Kyle Allen. So if you look at it from that perspective, if he could put up those numbers with those quarterbacks, imagine what he can do with Josh Allen.
I think let's bring up some more advanced statistics here outside of the box stats. Some Curtis Samuel success by route, running a 9. He was very successful at the post and corner. So he's going to be, when he's running those routes, being over 60% at some of those deeper routes, may continue to have shades of what Gabe Davis was able to do. That dig route was something that we love to throw. Curls, 83% success rate on curls. Screens, was wildly successful in all of his screen plays. Flats and slants, still very successful comebacks and curls. So he was a very successful receiver with most of his route tree, and it's pretty, as you can see, it's pretty versatile. His success rate was solid all the way around, and he ran a lot of slant routes, something the Bills, slants and curls, will make up 40% of what he did. And then some of the deeper stuff, about 8% dig rate, 10% on post, 9 route, he ran 7%. So he did some of the deep stuff, but really, slants and curls were 40% of his route tree, which is going to be a pretty interesting match. He cleared 75% success rate versus man in all 4 seasons, which is very good. 82nd percentile, and 80% success rate versus zone, the best of his career. So he has been very successful in different coverages, and the Bills, kind of feel like he can be a mismatch that they were trying to look for to see if they can get something out of Sherfield, and then they were trying to see what they could get out of Hardy, but they kind of merged in a way of what they're looking to do here. And they're just kind of saying, this is our entrenched receiver 4. It's just going to be a pure upgrade to Hardy. And then I think that they feel like Mac Hollins, also signed, is going to be a pure upgrade to Sherfield. So I think the Bills have upgraded a majority of the receiver room, and then getting Shorter back as well. But Ken, what will they do at the receiver 2 spot? How will that look compared to Gabe Davis? Because they've definitely upgraded the rest of the receiver room, in which they really needed to do, and still bringing back the obvious 3 tight ends too. So the receiver 2 position's a big opening right now too.
Yeah, and some people are saying that Curtis Samuel can be a wide receiver too, and I just do not like that, because in that case, I do not like this deal. Because if you're going to give him that kind of money and say, hey, you're the wide receiver 2 behind Stephon Diggs, then what are we doing? Because again, if this prohibits them from drafting that wide receiver and they pass up, let's just say Brian Thomas Jr. or Xavier Legette, and they draft a defensive end or a cornerback, I think a lot of Bills fans, myself included, will be very upset. But if they do draft one of those stud receivers who can eventually take over for Diggs as wide receiver 1, imagine how loaded that wide receiver room would be for Josh Allen, on top of the tight ends that you already mentioned. So, I tweeted this depth chart last week, and look at this. Let's just fill in wide receiver 2 with Brian Thomas Jr. and wide receiver 4 with Curtis Samuel. That is stacked right there.
Yeah, and obviously he has a high-end speed, 4.31 speed, 5'11", 196. So, he's caught 25 of his 29 deep, 20-plus yard catches, which is obviously much needed in this offense. He's taken some snaps out of the backfield. Only Deebo Samuel has been better at as a receiver out of the backfield than he has. So I think they're getting what they wanted out of Hardy for a little bit less of a money last year with Hardy, but they realized, okay, we need to upgrade that just a little bit. But I mean, he's a yak dimension to this offense that, some of those upgrades that the Bills were looking for in that Hardy style of role just got a whole lot better. So you're right. As long as he's in that Hardy role, I think it's a very nice looking player. If they're trying to get more out of him and with the receiver 2, I mean, it's going to be more challenging to me from that perspective. But if you look some more of his advanced analytics, 23rd in EPA per target, 21st in yards per route, 7th on target catch percentage. People love catch percentage. What does it mean? I don't know, but he's 7th, 97% of on target throws he caught. So top 7 in the league at that. So a lot of people used to use that against Gabe. Yes, Gabe got a lot of throws that were questionable from Josh's safety valve, but maybe Curtis Samuel will do better with the attempts that he gets, but he's always open. So that's a little bit of the difference. 25th in quarterback rated when targeted, 80th in advanced depth of target, on 68th in average depth of catch, 6.6 yards. So he's definitely somebody that's going to be a pure guy that can get open. There's a lot of things to like about him in 20 plus yards, first in passer rating, only one drop, tied for fourth with reception percentage at 62.5 on 20 plus yarders. So he's got some nice looking 20 plus yard plays. It is probably because he's, has some of the most separation in the league, is why that he is able to do so. So with all those kind of advanced stats, are the Bills done from a veteran perspective? It certainly kind of feels like that, Kevin. Are you taking it to the draft at the receiver position at this stage?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would be shocked if they did anything else. I do want to mention real quick, one of my favorite options, KJ Osborne, did sign with the Patriots. Not sure what they're doing with their wide receiver room, but I guess KJ Osborne can try to help them a little bit. Because, I mean, could he be a wide receiver 1 in New England? Because they just have so many mid-tier options where KJ Osborne might legit be a wide receiver 1, given the right quarterback.
That's what they're listing him at. And I think the separation numbers, he's tied with Tyreek Hill too for highest average separation at 3.3 yards. So 3.3 yards is a ton of yards for separation. Khalil Shakir is very good at that as well. So the Bills, I think, are in pretty good shape of looking for that style of receiver to be in the 3 and 4 role as a pure upgrade to what they had last year. And then I even think that Hollins could be potentially an upgrade over Sherfield. Hollins plays a lot of special teams, just like Sherfield. So we'll see the Bills upgrade really at another year. Shakir upgrading Hardy and upgrading Sherfield was that something that this offense could have desperately used Curtis Samuel in the playoffs. Now that I see that he's only 3.4 against the cap, I'm feeling a little bit better than I once was. But the Bills still do have roughly, I don't know. We don't know what the Mike Edwards deal is at the moment. So it's getting a little bit tougher to tell here, but they roughly are going to have about $11 million right now based on whatever is going to happen with the Edwards deal. So, and then 10 coming in June. So they do have a move they can make in June, and they have a move they can make now. The 177 deals aside, that won't really cost you any cap space. So you could stack 50 177 deals. It's not going to really change much on your cap. More importantly, there is room for one more deal now and maybe one more deal in June. So what are you thinking about using that on, Kevin? I mean, you don't have to go budget. You don't have to go bargain barrel because they do have some room to spend after the Taron Johnson extension, which we didn't bring up. With the Taron Johnson extension with the 3 years, making him the highest paid nickel corner in the league, I'm thinking it saves them an additional $4 to $5 million. So we'll see where that ends up. But locking him up is a huge deal. He's a starter. He's the best in the league at it. Him and Trent McDuffie, all pro, makes this offense or defense go round, stymies other defenses, is amazing as a run fit linebacker. So in Cloud Force. So what do you feel like that move allowed the Bills to do? So that's going to free money up. So tell me about that. And what are we going to do now? I mean, they have some money to spend. It doesn't have to just be $1.2 million dudes.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point because Taron Johnson had a $12.4 million cap hit going into the 2024 season prior to this extension. So to your point, that probably lowered it by at least $4 or $5 million. Did they go sign another defensive tackle? Do they get that running back? Do they pay Zeke Elliott? And I'm not going to say pay as in they're going to give him $5 million, but maybe they have a little bit more room to work with now where they can go address the defensive line a little bit more. They can get that RB2. And to your point, at the outside of this show, are they done at safety? Will they still be in play for Julian Blackman? So if they had that much money, now granted that you do have to save some money for your draft class, but with that extra money coming in from Trey White, we have some money to play around with here.
They do. And that's kind of what I meant. I mean, you can roll over some of that into next year, which they probably could do. Draft classes is kind of a common misconception. That's only going to cost like $2.5 million to the cap. So they're going to have more than enough to kind of handle that. They didn't end up touching Diggs' deal. They did every other move. They did every single other move but Diggs. They didn't do the full Josh Allen, which is kind of smart. So that'll save a little bit in the future. But they did every other move but the Diggs, and then the little bit of money they could have made on Ed Oliver, like it was negligible. That was the one that I know others were convinced it happened. It doesn't seem like it's happened. But other than that, like it's a negligible amount of money. I mean, 4 million is 4 million, but they could still pull that later on if they want a trade deadline deal or something in the summer. They could definitely pull that. But there's definitely going to be some Josh Allen maneuvering next year. It's not going to keep restructuring it. They're going to probably do the 10-year deal thing that the Chiefs do, and then giving him a $35 million option bonus every single year that they can, decide how they're going to either eat it that year, or they're going to push it out. So there's definitely going to be some Josh Allen money to be maneuvering around. But the Diggs deal not getting done, the Bills could go to that if they needed to. I just don't see a big move that they need that's going to mess with Diggs's restructure. So should put them in a fairly maneuverable spot next year. But I still think even without the restructure, there's still not much money to be made on the Diggs contract. So we'll kind of see how that all kind of positions itself in the offseason 1 year from now. But I think, to me, I'm spending that money we saved on Taron Johnson for a safety. That's kind of where I want to go into the draft full of safety. I don't really see anybody else on the list that they could go after. I don't know. Am I missing anyone, Kevin?
I don't know. I was just trying to think what positions need to get addressed. Tight end is good. I'm good on wide receiver, considering that we still have the draft, and we talked about the need for drafting that wide receiver too. Obviously, the quarterback room is good. Running back, yeah, that's the one position. I would still like them to bring in a veteran. I think they will bring in some more offensive linemen, considering their cap hits here and their salary cap, I should say. Someone like a Chris Hubbard, a veteran tackle, he could be competition on the outside for Tommy Doyle coming back from that injury. You mentioned some interior offensive linemen. We'll probably see some of those deals start to trickle in. And then, like I said, with the defensive line, defensive tackle for sure, maybe another defensive end. Linebacker, I'm confident there. Maybe they bring back Tyler Matakevich for special teams purposes. I guess another one we can mention here, maybe corner. Do they do something else at corner with Dane going to Carolina?
Probably. They probably do. And like you mentioned, O-line, could they go with the vet route still? There's definitely some. Let's real quickly here, because now that we freed up some money, let's bring in this reel one more time to kind of look at what's there at some of those positions you were just mentioning. So corner does have some playable guys. How high end will they go? I mean, we've heard these rumblings. Will Levi Wallace come back? I'm sure the Bills have some form of small offer on the table for him. Will they go better than Levi Wallace? Dory Jackson could make sense. Could they go higher than that? You got Jerry Jacobs. Could they entertain bringing Trey back? You got Miles Bryant, Kella Witherspoon, Steven Nelson are good players. So will they go a higher end guy? They could, or will they go around the Levi Wallace range, which is probably the most realistic range? Some interesting looking guys in there: Vontae Maddox, Rocky Sin, Kendall Vildor. There's some nice looking backup names on the list where the Bills could go with that direction on the Levi Wallace end. But then, if you look at more importantly, like the center list, I mean, Connor Williams is, to me, a top 10 center. The Dolphins went a different direction. He got hurt. He's definitely a guy I would buy low on, man. I mean, that is a top 10 center in this league. What will that look like? But you got guys like, Nick Gates, who could come in and be decent. You got Tyler Larson from Washington, Brian Allen from the Rams. There's definitely some names that could come in and be very sufficient contributors. And then you got some from the guard position, where there's definitely Greg Van Roten was really good last year. I don't think the Bills would bring him back, but Gloinski, you got, Dalton Risner, Riley Reff. You got a couple of names, Cody Whitehair. You got a couple of names in there that could absolutely come in and be really big contributors, at least from a backup lineman standpoint. And then you see receiver, there's really nothing there unless Bills were very intrigued by finally doing the Odell Beckham Jr. thing, or the Tyler Boyd or Michael Thomas. Is it crazy they would look at Michael Thomas or Corey Davis on a see what they can do basis? It's not crazy to think about, especially if the receiver room doesn't go away that they're thinking about. They could absolutely try to bring in some other form of talented player like Shark or MVS or something along those lines. But I think that they'll want to maybe Odell Beckham Jr. So I think that some of those receiver names could be revisited if for some reason the draft doesn't go a certain way. So what's your final takeaways, Kevin? Leave us with some final opinions that you have for the free agency week 2 and what's on your mind.
Well, I'll save my final opinions for a couple minutes from now, but I just want to throw another name out there, Trey Turner, as an offensive guard. I mean, the Bills have been linked to him for years because of that Carolina connection. And I mentioned Justin McCray's name before. He used to be here in Buffalo. I mean, do you think either of those guys could be options? Just cheap bottom of the barrel guys. Maybe the Bills will bring them in.
Yeah, you could put those. Once again, if we're looking at the bottom of the barrel, sure, like anybody is to me on the docket for that. I mean, they'll make a phone call for the bottom of the barrel style of guys, whenever they feel like it's necessary. But I mean, Trey Turner really hasn't logged any meaningful snaps in a couple of years, so he may be done with the league. I'm not exactly sure what his situation is, but he tore his quad, I think, right after the 2022 season. So I'm not sure if he's still going.
Speaking of being done, didn't Corey Davis retire?
No, he's back.
Oh, did he come back? Did I miss that?
Yeah, he came back maybe a week ago. He said he was going to play again, and the Jets then released him.
Oh, you know what? I did see that.
Took him off the retirement list. Yeah.
Because I think I saw that the Jets released Corey Davis without thinking, wait a sec, this guy already retired. So I just saw like, Corey Davis got released. He hasn't really been able to latch on, whatever. And yeah, okay, so he retired, came back, got released. Now he's a free agent again.
Yeah. And the Bills have 59 active roster players, 20 with UDFAs. So that brings them to 71 players. 79 players. So in theory, there can still be 10 free agents to still be had. So there will be some bottom of the barrel guys. Could Corey Davis be one on the boundary that you could get a lot out of? I wouldn't hate it based on how other things play out if you entertain a Corey Davis, Michael Thomas, Odell Beckham Jr. based on how the draft plays out. If they really can't help themselves with other positions, it's not the route I would go, but it's got to be in the back of the Bills' head that if the draft plays out a certain way and they go defensive tackle, safety, or defensive tackle, offensive line, or whatever else could pop up, I think that in the back of their head, they know that they could make a call to one of those guys in May if they're looking still for they're pretty covered at the flex and the slot position, but if they're looking for a boundary, it's pretty plausible to assume that they can make a phone call to one of those vets that are still, Odell Beckham Jr. still had a very good year. What could Michael Thomas be? And Corey Davis has had good moments. So it's very plausible the Bills could make a call for a boundary if the draft doesn't go a certain way. I'm not even entertaining that because I think they get a receiver in the first 60 picks. But if they don't, I think that some of those vets could very, very well be in play. So, Kevin, what are your final takeaways here from Free Agency Week 2 and going forward?
Well, I'm going to leave you with a few names here that I think the Bills could target and potentially sign before the next time that we come to you guys live. So, number 1, defensive tackle Austin Johnson. Number 2, running back Ezekiel Elliott. And number 3, offensive tackle Chris Hubbard. And I'll throw a 4th one in there, the Tyler Matakevich re-signing for special teams. So those are 4 players who I think we could get deals with. And then maybe with that extra money, you're going to see some more depth and competition, maybe more wide receivers, maybe more safeties, maybe another defensive end. I mean, I'm pretty set. I feel more confident after the Mike Edwards signing today. Now I think we just need to shore up defensive tackle and maybe running back, and I'm ready for the draft.
Yeah, we have over 600 people watching live now. If you guys wouldn't mind, we're going to do giveaways. We're also I'm going to give away some tickets. We're going to do a lot of cool things. Smash subscribe on our YouTube channel. That would be excellent. I know people are watching from Twitter. They're watching from all over the place. If you could go onto YouTube and just smash our subscribe button, that would mean a ton to us. We do this every week, and you can tell we come prepared, we come consistent, and we want to talk ball. Yes, please obviously sub to the channel and like the show too. That would mean a ton. Just smashing that helps us in the logarithm as well, as we're going to be obviously mashing up our favorite moments. And to all of our on-demand listeners, thank you so much from the Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever you get your on-demand podcasts as well. Anybody watching this back too, we appreciate you tuning in. Always join us live at 7:00 on Wednesdays. To our sponsors, the Summit Center and Larson-Timko, we really always appreciate them being on board here with us. RJ, miss you, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And always a pleasure seeing you around. But we definitely have some really cool content coming. We're going to have some cool draft content coming, live stuff going on here in a month. I'll be bringing you content starting really soon. Starting next week, I'm going to really start diving in some draft content. Kevin will as well. with our favorite prospects and what we're thinking. And yeah, we'll definitely do a live mock draft live on the show. That is definitely in the cards. Maybe I like to do one live because I'm not a huge 5 mock drafts. I usually release maybe 4 versions of my mock. And we'll definitely do one live here on the show in the coming weeks, maybe in 2 weeks time from now. Definitely as April hits, I'll feel like doing a live mock draft. So we'll get into that as well in future editions. But for anyone, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate the hour and 15 minutes. And we're going to continue to do some great live draft shows live. And then you're going to catch probably us. We have a tradition here at the Going Deep Buffalo show where we do day 3. And this year we finally get 9 draft picks, Kevin. So we're going to enjoy some day 3 coverage. As of now, I have been on the clock here doing my live draft show when they've traded back and left us with like literally 1 pick with Justin Shorter and then took a couple guys in the 7th. So they've killed me before, but the 9 draft choices, this is our Christmas season on a Saturday to be able to deliver live content with that many players to talk about. And we'll bring on some special guests throughout the day. On day 3 as well. And, you can catch us maybe jumping around in other shows on day 1 and day 2. So from the Going Deep Buffalo show on the Built in Buffalo podcast network, what do you got to leave us with, Kevin?
Just a couple of housekeeping things. So I was live for 7 hours last year on day 3. So I am looking forward to doing that again. Number 2, while you were talking, we have 5 shows until the draft. So like you said, we're going to ramp up our draft coverage soon. And I also like doing the live mock drafts. I think that's very helpful. So make sure if you were in here tonight or any other night, make sure you come prepared because we'll probably call on you guys as well. And the last bit of housekeeping that I have is you mentioned giveaways. I forgot to mention this last week. I have a former player jersey. I'm not going to give it away now, but next week I'm planning on running a giveaway for a former Bill. I'll say this. He's an offensive player and it's a throwback jersey. So be on the lookout on my Twitter page for that, as I will be giving away a jersey very soon.
Yeah, and we're talking I think I see a couple questions. We're talking about our live show. We'll be talking about the amount that we have, 9 draft choices that we have on our day 3 draft. Only 2 of them, and 1 obviously in day 1 and 1 on day 2 right now. But between the 3rd or the 4th swap, we got the 9th. So they have 11 picks, 9 of them, 2 4ths. 3 5ths, 3 6ths, and a 7th that we're going to be discussing live. So Kevin has already experienced on day 3 on a Saturday. He's just going to bring that experience over here with us. Obviously in Going Deep Buffalo to talk about live, lots to talk about this year as compared to last year. And in future years, really, the Bills like to trade their 4ths. Now we have 2 of them. So there's definitely going to be some quality players that I'm still going to want to stick around and talk to you guys all about. So it's going to be fun. Got some giveaways. We're going to do some things. Maybe anybody tuning into that show, subscribe to the channel. And if you tune into that show, maybe I'll give you some home opener tickets. We'll figure out something that we're feeling special on that. But we really appreciate everybody tuning in. Into our subscribers already, we're growing like crazy. So I really appreciate everybody following us for over 101 editions now. So we've been here, going to a 3rd year mark for Going Deep Buffalo. So we're pretty happy that we've been able to bring some really great content. And Built in Buffalo is your draft home. I know the Buffalo Basement shows on Fridays. They'll be live on set at Elio DePaulo's going live on their draft show, which I'll probably be on. So you can catch me there. And then, we're going to be bringing you content all throughout the weekend. So get our opinions and more. And see how good we do on our mock draft. Something being accurate on my mock drafts is something I pride myself on more than getting the prospects right. How good a prospect will be. I kind of pride myself on what more the Bills may do. So tune in and we'll see how that all goes. But thank you all. 7:00 Wednesdays. We'll be back at you next week to start some draft talk and recap anything else free agency week 3 related. And we'll catch everybody in 1 week from right now. And thanks again for all of our on-demand listeners as well.